Hey guys, welcome to this CrewAI crash course. By the end of this video, you're going to learn everything that you need to know to go off and create an army of your own AI agents. And to help you get there, I've actually broken up this video into 3 key parts. First, we're going to cover what is the CrewAI framework. Second, we're going to cover how it works and its 4 key components. And then finally, what we're going to do is go off and create our own crew from scratch so that you can see how everything works together. But real quick, I just want to mention that if you want to grab the source code for this project and the rest of my other Fullstack AI projects, all you have to do is just scroll down in the description below and click the link and you'll be able to download everything. And other than that, I just want to mention that if you have any questions, all you have to do is just drop a comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you guys as fast as possible. Or you can actually schedule a quick one-on-one call with me where we can actually dive deep into whatever you're working on and help you get to a solution. But enough of that, let's go ahead and dive back into the video. So at this point, you might be wondering, what is CrewAI and what can it do? Well, at its high level, CrewAI is a framework that allows us to create AI agents where each agent has its own expertise and set of instructions. And together, these agents will work towards solving one large complex problem. For example, we can use CrewAI for tasks like helping us pick stocks, planning vacations, building Python games, and much more. In fact, let me actually show you 3 quick examples of CrewAI in action so you can get just as excited for this technology as I am. So the first example I want to show you guys from the CrewAI is going to be the stock analyst. And what this analyst is going to do is go off and research a company for us and put together a super nice, concise report, letting us know whether we should buy it, hold it, or sell it. So let me show you what the actual output from this crew would look like. So as you can see, this crew goes off and researches the internet to find reports for us. From there, it's going to slowly start building up an internal memory bank of what's been happening. And then from there, it's going to go off and research quarterly reports, keep doing more research, keep building up its in-bank memory on what needs to happen. And then finally, at the very end, it's going to create a report for us that tells us exactly what we should do. In this case, it says, hey, you should hold onto the Tesla stock. Here are some positive indicators about the stock. Here are some concerns I have. And here's some upcoming events that may change our outlook for the stock going forward. So this is awesome. This would have taken us hours to do manually, but with CrewAI, it took 7.5 minutes. That's insane, the amount of work that this just saved us. So let's go ahead and move on to the next amazing example. So the second one that's my most favorite out of all the examples is going to be the trip planner crew. Now, the way this one works is you tell the crew, hey, I'm traveling from here. I want to go to here. I want to do this trip sometime in the future. And while I'm traveling, I like to do these things. And then from there, this crew will use 3 different agents to plan your trip. One of the agents is going to go off and pick cities for us. The other agent is going to find cool things to do while we're in each one of those cities. And the third agent is going to be the mastermind itinerary planner that's going to connect all the dots for us. And it's going to go off and research everything for us and put together a budget, looking at flight tickets and everything. And at the very end, it's going to generate us this final report that you can see right here, where it's going to say, hey, here's your 7-day itinerary for November, and here's what you need to do each day. This is amazing. This would normally take people hours upon hours of research to come up with an awesome itinerary like this. And the part that's even the coolest is it found that there was a great festival going on in Thailand during November. So it actually helped plan our entire trip around this festival to basically maximize our time while we're there. So all around, this is awesome. And let's go ahead and move on to example number 3. In the third example that I'm super excited to show you guys is the game builder crew. Now, the way that this crew works is you type in a description of what type of game you would like the crew to go off and build. In my case, I'm trying to make the Pong game, so I briefly describe how it works and how I would expect the game mechanics to behave. And then from there, 3 different agents go off to code the game, review the source code, and continually approve it over and over and over again until we actually get some valid source code. So as you can see, it just keeps going over and over and over again as they slowly iterate through all the code. And at the very end, we end up getting this code right here, which is the code that we'll need to run the Pong game. So what I've done is copied and pasted this code over here. And as you can see, we're not getting any big bright red squiggly, so we're pretty confident that's going to work. So what I did is I actually just come over here to our terminal and I'm going to run our game, and it's just called Python, and I named the file pong.py. So whenever I try running the game, what will happen is it'll actually open up a Pygame instance, and as you can see, we can actually come over here and actually play the game of Pong. And it actually works, which is amazing, because this would have definitely taken, any of us way more than 4 minutes to code up this game, especially if you're not familiar with how Pygame works. So all around, this is awesome. And now that that you've seen a few different examples of how CrewAI can work, let's actually dive deeper into understanding how it works. So after that, we can go on and create our own crews ourselves. So now it's time for us to start diving into how CrewAI actually works. And in this section, we're going to cover the 4 core components of CrewAI and talk about how they work together to solve complex problems. So this is where we're going to be covering agents, tools, tasks, and processes. So let's go ahead and dive into each one of these one by one. So the first core component we're going to look at are agents. And agents are basically like employees who belong to a business who are designed to do a specific job. So think writers, researchers, and managers. Now these employees are able to make choices on their own, and they're able to work together by sharing information and assigning tasks to one another. And as a part of the business, these employees are working together to solve one specific problem. And as programmers, we're able to assign properties to each one of these agents, meaning we're able to assign a role, a goal, backstories, and tools to help orient how each one of these agents should behave. And to help this all make sense, let's actually look at the trip planner crew that we looked at the beginning when we're looking at all the different examples. Now, as you can see, the trip planner had 3 different agents to help plan our trips. They had a city selection agent, a local expert agent, and a travel concierge agent. As you can see, each one of these agents was assigned different properties, roles, goals, backstories, and tools to help us plan our trips. So now that we know that agents are specialized employees who help us solve bigger problems, let's go ahead and move on to the next part and talk about tools and talk about how they're going to help our agents. And the second core component of CrewAI is going to be tools. And tools are something that agents can use to perform a specific task. So if this was the real world, think of a builder can use a hammer to hit a nail. Well, in our case, agents can use tools to go search on the internet, or they can use it to start actually performing calculations. And there's 2 types of tools. There are built-in tools that are already a part of LangChain. So as you can see, this list of LangChain tools is pretty huge, and these are all different tools that we can connect with. And the second option is we can use custom tools. Now let's just go over quick 3 custom tools that we've already seen in previous examples. So the first tool is going to be the calculator tool. Now this comes from our trip planner tool, where it was adding up our expenses for getting flights, getting tickets, and going out on excursions. A little bit more complex tool that you might not have seen is going to be the search tool. Now this is what was running behind the scenes in our trip planner, and it was also running behind the scenes in our stock analysis. This is what we were using to go off on the internet, gather information for us so that we could come to an answer. And a more fancy one that I thought you guys would think was pretty cool was a part of the stock analysis. And what this tool was designed to do was to actually search up for quarterly reports from different companies. They're looking for 10Q forms, and this was actually using a custom API, which was called the SEC API, to go off and grab this information. So those are examples of 3 custom tools, and you can obviously create whatever kind of tools that you want to, and we'll actually go off and create our own custom ones later on. But enough of talking about tools, let's go ahead and dive on to core component number 3. And the third core component of CrewAI is going to be tasks. And tasks are essentially jobs or assignments that AI agents need to complete. And these tasks will define what needs to be done, and it can also include additional information such as like which agent needs to go off and do the work, and it also might explicitly call out which tools the agent needs to use. And once again, with these tasks, we're able to define a few core properties such as a description, the agent, and the tools, like I just mentioned. So let's go ahead and look at some example tasks so that you guys can see what these look like in the real world. So I went ahead and pulled up the stock analysis crew so that we can see the 4 underlying tasks that were used to run this job. So the 4 tasks that we have are the research task, which goes off and collects and summarizes news articles and everything it can find on the internet. Outside of that, we had the financial analysis task, which was to basically go off and look at the underlying fundamentals of the company. Then we have the filings analysis, who was going off and actually looking at the quarterly reports and annual disclosures released by the company. And then finally, we had the recommend task, which is where we were synthesizing all the data down into one task and producing our final answer. Now, what you'll notice is each one of these tasks specifically called out which agent was going to perform this duty. But what you'll also notice is that we did not specifically call out which tools the agent was allowed to do. Now, this is where it comes down to some of the underlying magic of CrewAI, where these agents will figure out on their own which tools they should use in order to complete their job. So CrewAI is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us, but I just want to show you guys that this is what it is looking like under the hood whenever you want to go off and complete and do some work with agents. This is how you actually define the tasks that need to get done. And the fourth and final core component of CrewAI is going to be the process. And the process is by far the most important part because it defines how agents agents are going to work together, how tasks are going to be assigned to each of the agents, and whenever the agents need to work together, it's going to handle all that glue to make sure that all the proper work gets done. And in the future, there's going to be multiple ways that these processes are going to handle work, but just for now, all you need to know that the process makes sure that works get done sequentially, meaning each agent does the job and then all the work from that agent gets passed along to the next agent. In the future, they're going to add hierarchical processes and a bunch more, but for right now, I just want you to know, stick to sequential. So now that we've covered the 4 core components of CrewAI separately, let's go ahead and tie them all together. And I think the best way to do that is to look at the stock analysis crew example. So what I've done is I pulled up the main run function of this crew, and let's go through this line by line. So right out the gate, you can see we're taking in our agents, which define which types of employees we're going to have. Then we decide, pull in which task we need to perform. So these are the jobs. And then from there, we actually go ahead and specifically pull out the actual agents and task within each one of those. And then from there, what you might be missing is where are all the tools that we defined? Well, those are actually tied to the agents. So if we dive into one of the agents, you can see that these are the specific tools that they can use. And then now we need to look at the 4th core component, which is going to be the process, which defines how the work it's all going to get tied together. So what we do is we add that to our main crew file, which connects everything together, our agents, our tasks, our tools, and our processes, and we task it and put it all together, and then we go off and kick off our crew. So that's how all these 4 major core components of a crew work together to help us complete our complex task. So now that we've talked about all the theory, let's go off and start making our own new crew so that you guys can see it in action, and so you can go off and create your own army of AI agents later on. All right, so welcome to the fun part of the video where we're gonna start coding up and building our own crews. And in this portion, we're actually going to recreate the trip planner from scratch. And as we do this, we're going to cover common pitfalls and tips that I want to share with you guys because I've made multiple crews and it's very easy to make crews that don't work. So I'm going to be sharing everything that I've learned with you guys. And the reason that we're going to recreate the trip planner with a few improvements is because this crew exemplifies the ideal crew workflow. And what I mean by that is we give this crew one high-level goal to achieve. And this goal can actually be broken down into many subtasks. And from there, once we have our 10 to 100 subtasks, the crew will work together to synthesize all of the different data it just gathered into one single output. And in our case, this is going to be a 7-day trip. So it's important to remember the ideal crew workflow is one large goal that can be broken down into a bunch of small subtasks that eventually come right back and condense to one final output. And then I also want to give a huge shout out to Zhao, who's the creator of CrewAI and all the examples that we just looked at. I'll put a link down to his repositories below so you can check them out on your own. But outside that, let's go ahead and start building our own crew from scratch. I'm excited. Let's go. So the very first thing that we need to do to create our new crew is to start building out our new project. And the easiest way to do that is to head over to Zhao's Create Examples repository. And the reason we want to do this is because we can go ahead and use his starter template to help us jumpstart this process. So all we need to do is come over here and click the code button, and we're going to copy that URL to this repository. And once we've done that, we're going to head back over to our terminal, and we're going to go ahead and clone this repository with git clone and paste in that URL. Now from there, it should take a few seconds to go ahead and download everything, but we can actually see that it works and that it has our proper starter template right over here. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and move out this starter template, and we want to go ahead and give it a name. So in our case, we're just going to go ahead and call it our trip planner from scratch. Great. So it's going to take a few seconds, but now what we can do is go ahead and open up that trip planner from scratch, and this will open up a new Visual Studio Code instance that we can start typing in. Now, let me give you a quick overview of what this repository looks like in all of its current folders, and then we'll actually dive into making it more usable for our use case. So the main file is obviously where we're going to start. And you can see that Zhao has already populated it with some initial tools. For example, he has us using DuckDuckGo search. And what you can see from a high level overview is we're able to import our agents. We're able to import our task. And then from there, we just kind of connect the dots of our agents are going to be used in these tasks. And then we go ahead and symbol the crew and then kick it off. And then at the very end, you can see whenever we start this main function, what we're going to do is take in a few input variables and then run the crew. So that's how it all works. But now what we're going to do is start going through this part by part and building it out. And the way I would like to flow you guys through this is first by building out the agents, then we're going to build out the tools, then we're going to build out the task, which are actually the most important part in my opinion, and then finally we're going to connect all the dots here on our main.py. So let's go ahead and get started working on these one by one. But before we dive into building out the core components of our crew, we need to quickly set up our Python environment so that we will have all the proper dependencies and we're able to run our Python script. And the easiest way to do that is we are going to set up our pyproject.toml file. This is basically just going to turn all of our requirements for this project into code so that we can just run our install script basically to package and build all the necessary dependencies to run our Python application. Now, I will say this is the boring part, so we're going to speed through it as fast as possible so that we can get you up and running with your Python scripts. So all we need to do to create our Python project is we're basically going to define something that looks just like this, to where we, basically just define, here's our project, here's what's included in it, here's our dependencies. So you'll see this in action in just a second. I just want to show it to you. But the important action items for you are you first need to basically install Poetry. Now, what Poetry is going to do is allow us to install all of the dependencies that we mentioned in our TOML file. And in order to install Poetry, you'll just need to run this command right here, pipx install Poetry. And just for you users who don't already have pipx installed, what you'll need to do is come over here and go ahead and install pipx. Now, if you're on a Mac, you'll run these instructions, on Linux, these instructions, and if you're on Windows, you're just going to install these. So I'm not going to dive into too much of that just because that's a little too in the weeds. But once you've installed pipx and Poetry, let's go ahead and hop back over to our code so that we can start building out our own TOML file. So the first thing we're going to do back over in Visual Studio Code is we're going to make sure we have Poetry installed if you just followed those few steps. So all we have to do to check to make sure it is working properly, we just type in Poetry -- version, and whenever we run it, you should get back the version number, and this will probably change based on the time you're watching this video. And if you had any issues getting this set up, feel free to drop a comment down below and I'll do my best to provide some help as quickly as I can. So enough of that, let's go ahead and move on to the next part. Now what we're going to be doing is going ahead and creating our own pyproject.toml file. So all we need to do is just say pyproject.toml. And like I said, this is where we're going to be describing our package. Now there's two key components that we want to set up in here. So the first one is going to be tool.poetry. And this is where we need to define the core components, such as like the name, description, everything like that. The other core component that we're going to be working on is our dependencies. Now our dependencies are where we're going to specifically call out and outline which package numbers and versions we need to use to set up crew. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste in the dependencies just because it's not fun watching me type in boring stuff like this. But the important part is we need to be using Python between version 3.10 and 3.12. We need to be using CrewAI. Outside of that, we want to be able to handle unstructured data, and this will come in more into play later on. We'll get there whenever we get there. But the other few things are important. We need to be using PyOM, and this is just allows us to access and manage weather data. This is going to be important when scheduling out our different crews and make basically our event planners and city planners to make sure that we're going to locations when it's not too rainy and it's actually going to be enjoyable. Outside of that, we want to set up tools. Now this is going to be for LangChain, and we want to make sure that we are able to decorate our tools so that they are usable by LangChain. And the final thing is we just want to be able to use python.env because we need to eventually start using our OpenAI keys, and this is going to allow us to do it. Okay, the next part is we need to set up our just generic parts of the application, basically our package. So we're just going to call this trip planner.youtube because I'm making this for you guys on YouTube. Then we're just going to set up version 0.1.0 because this is our first release. And then we're just going to set up a description, and we're just going to say this is a simple AI trip planner. And then finally, what we're going to do is just add the authors. So what we'll do, just feel free to put your name here. Yeah, we're also just going to put Zhao because he was the creator of this and his name was Zhao. Let's just make sure I get this right. I don't want to spell his name wrong. And we also got to give credit where credit's due. So Zhao and Ndmoura. Probably misspelled that, but he's the, yeah, I think it's this one. There we go. So yeah, he's the creator, and then I'm editing it. So we'll put Brandon. Fantastic. Enough of that, but let's go ahead. Now that we've set up these two core components, what I also want to do is just let you know that we also need to do a few other things inside of our PyPoetry file. What we can do in here in our Py project is, I'm just going to walk you through these real fast. The first thing is we can go ahead and set up PyWrite. Now, PyWrite is going to allow us to check our Python code for type errors. And like I said, just make sure that we're writing good, valid code. The next tool that we can set up to run inside of our Py project is called Rough. And this, once again, just make sure that we don't have any errors, and it also checks for styling issues. And then finally, there's the build system, and this just defines and lets us know that Poetry is going to be the tool for managing our Python project dependencies. So it's going to package and everything up and make sure it works. So like I said, feel free to copy and paste these parts, but I just want to walk you through setting this up because this is how we're going to be creating our Python environment, and we'll go ahead and start working on that now. So all we have to do next is just open up our terminal, and then we can type in poetry install -- no root. Now what it's going to do is go off and install all the proper dependencies and everything else that we need to create our new Python environment. And you can see that it works. If you type in poetry env list, you'll see our new Python environment, which actually has our same name here, and it calls out the specific Python version that was used. Fantastic. And you can actually go ahead and enter in your poetry environment, and you just type in poetry shell, and this will activate the current environment, whatever folder you're currently inside of. So this is opening up our new Python environment. You can see it gets called out right here. So give yourself a pat on the back. You just did the first most important step to where you now have actually a Python environment that you can start using. What we're going to do next is actually go ahead and start working on our agents, and we're going to move over to the fun stuff. So now it's time for us to start building out our own agents for our trip planner. And all we have to do is go ahead and first open up our agents.py file. And to help make your guys' life as easy as possible, I went ahead and made a cheat sheet for you guys to help you as you progress and start building your own custom agents. And the reason I did this is because there was nowhere on the internet where I found that defined how to make a good agent. There were just a bunch of tutorials that said, oh, this file works. There's a bunch of agents, just copy and paste it to your own code. But there was not a template that I could use to go off and create my own agents. So that's what I want to share with you guys right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste this. And so here's the cheat sheet that I've created for you guys. So we're gonna work on filling this out first before we dive down in here and actually start coding up our agents. We need to make sure we have a solid grasp on what we're building first. Okay, so let me read you what we're going to be doing in this cheat sheet. So in order to create a great agent, you need to be thinking like a boss. And what I mean by that is you need to be working backwards from the goal that you were trying to achieve. And you need to think of which employees you need to hire to help get the job done. And the best way I like to start off by doing this is going ahead and defining a captain. And the captain is basically going to be the main manager who is working towards achieving the main goal. So yeah, they're going to be orienting the other agents towards the goal as well. And then what you need to do from there is once you defined your, captain, you need to figure out which expert that captain needs to communicate with or delegate tasks to in order to basically help achieve the hierarchical goal. So, and the best way to approach this is to really build a top-down structure where you have a manager, and then that manager has someone that they talk to, and then you have a worker. So basically just think of a traditional business that's very hierarchical. All right, so let's go ahead and actually start defining these different areas for our trip planner with the end goal of once you've done it once for our trip planner, you can go off and start building your own agents for your own projects. So the first thing that we want to do when it comes to creating our goal is we want to say that we are trying to create a 7-day travel itinerary with detailed per-day plans, including budget, packing suggestions, and safety trips. So now that we know what we're trying to do, well, who would be a great captain, manager, or boss to help steer the ship that we could hire to make sure that we're able to achieve this goal? Well, I think a expert travel agent would be a great person who could go off and accomplish this goal. That's in real life, that's exactly what travel agents do. They do this for a real life job. So now we have to keep thinking in our top-down structure and think of, well, who does our expert travel agent need to talk to? Well, our agent, they're going to be able to kind of do some of the higher planning, but we need to take in our users' feedback on where they want to travel to. So let's just say we wanted to go to Thailand or we wanted to go to Italy. Well, what we need to do is this travel agent needs to talk to someone who can find all the good places to visit in such a country. So that's why the next option that you want to hire for your small business and for your crew is going to be a city selection expert. That way, whenever we know we want to go to Italy or Thailand, our city selection expert will tell us all the great spots that we need to go to during our 7-day travel. And then the final thing is, well, what do we want to do? And who does this city selection expert need to talk to? Well, let's say the city expert tells us 3 cities that we need to go to. Now what we need to do is actually work on the per day plans. It's always important to go back to our original goals. So how do we know what we want to do on a per day plan? Well, it sounds like we need to talk to a local expert or a local tour guide to talk to our master travel agent to help plan out what we're going to be doing per day in each city. So that's why our final employee that we're going to be hiring is going to be a local tour guide. So this is basically how you go about building out a crew like this. And now what we can do is go off and actually start filling in what each one of these agents is going to be doing inside of our code. So, and I hope this makes sense. And I also wanted to give you guys some extra notes too. And these are going to become applicable as we go down here and start creating our agents. So yeah, let's go ahead and start doing that. We're going to start filling in each one of these new agents we made and turn them into actual code so we can start actually using them in our crew. So let's start working on that now. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and define our agents. As you can see, there's two right now that are just boilerplate agents, but we're going to fill them in. So I'm going to go ahead and say the first agent we want to make is going to be our expert travel agent. And it's kind of funny because like we're building agents, but travel agent is already a real world. The next thing that we want to do is go ahead and create our city selection expert. This is the person who's going to tell us all the great places to go inside of a country. And then finally, what we're going to do is go off and create our third agent, which is going to be our local tour guide. So let's go ahead and do this. Local tour guide. Fantastic. So we have that working. Let's get everything indented properly. So now what we're going to do is go per agent and actually start filling out what this agent needs to be doing. So when it comes to making roles, backstories, and goals, I went ahead and made some instructions for you guys. So let's scroll up to the top. So as you can see, whenever we're trying to make an agent, we need to make sure that this agent is always results driven. Anytime you don't make an agent that's result driven, you'll be get very frustrated because when you go off and run your crew, you're going to get back some garbage. So I've run into this plenty of times myself. So I'm trying to save y'all a ton of headache. And the other thing is this agent also needs to have a clear goal in mind. Like you need to produce blank. The other thing is going a little bit deeper. The role is really just going to be their job title. The goal, or really obviously the goal we're going to define here. This is where I'm saying we need to be results driven and have a clear goal in mind. And then the backstory, really, it just needs to be their resume. So for example, if I was to ask you what you do for your job and you were an expert at something, you would just say, I'm an expert at this and I help people achieve blank. So hopefully that's enough for a quick crash course, and I hope these notes really do help as you go off and create your own agents. But let's actually put this new knowledge to test. So the first thing when it comes to creating our expert travel agent, let's go ahead and define our role. So like I said, it's basically just going to be the same name that we had up here. So we're just going to be an expert travel agent. Now, when it comes to our backstory, this is going to be our resume. So in our case, we're just going to say that I'm actually going to pause on this. I like to do the backstory at the end because the backstory should support the goal. So let's go ahead and actually just knock out the goal real fast. So when it comes to creating our goal, I just want to say that our goal is to create a 7-day travel itinerary plan. That's half the story. We're going to keep going there. So we're trying to create a 7-day travel plan. Let's go ahead and open this up so we can, yeah, there we go. So we're trying to create a 7-day itinerary with travel plans. We also want to include budget, packing suggestions, and we also want to include safety tips. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's our goal. And just to reiterate, what we're trying to do here is we want to have results driven and a clear goal in mind. So, and this is all action, like we are creating. Here's what we're trying to create. So I hope this is making sense. I'm not going to keep diving back into it, but you'll be very frustrated if you don't do what I'm telling you here, because it fought me for a very long time whenever I was trying to do this by myself. So the next thing, like I said, what we would do for the backstory is we just want to reiterate basically our goal and rephrase it. So I always just like to say, like, for example, I'm an expert in travel planning and logistics. And then I also just want to say after that, I have decades of experience making travel itineraries. Basically, what we're trying to do here is just help our agent get in character. Fantastic. There we go. Let's just do that. Okay, cool. So life is looking good. And what we're going to do is we are going to come back to this later when it comes to setting up our tools. Also, it's important to note, if you just hover over the agent, you usually can go ahead and, it's not doing it right now, but you normally can go ahead and see all the other options and the default values that they're set to. So right now, when it comes to like allowing delegation, I prefer to leave that to false, and false is the default option. So we can actually just go ahead and delete all those. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and just leave it how it is right now. But I do want to put a pro tip here for you guys. If you actually go over to your OpenAI usage, you'll notice that there were some days where I was racking up like a $5 or $6 bill. And that's from just running one of these trip planners using GPT-4. And I did it like 5 times. So it's almost like $1 almost $1, more like 75 cents per run. So you can quickly rack up a bill if you're testing with this. So hopefully all these notes I'm sharing you save you some money as well as you're going through and doing this. So if you're trying to save money and during testing, I definitely recommend using GPT 3.5. And as you go on eventually to maybe like building out a real production application, or you're happy with the results, move over to ChatGPT 4 because it's going to give you much higher quality results. So, but I'm gonna go ahead and update it to 4 for you guys just so y'all can see it in action. So OpenAI GPT 4, fantastic. We're just going to do some cleaning up. Okay, cool. So now let's go ahead and move on to the next agent, and we're going to start speeding through these just because there's a bunch of other stuff that we also need to start working on next. So for this one, our role is just going to be a city selection expert. And then for our goal, what we're trying to do with this one is we just want to select the best cities based on weather, season, price, and our traveler's interest. So I'm just going to go ahead, paste that in. And then our backstory, once again, what we're trying to do is just reiterate what we have decided we want to be our goal. So I'm going to go open this up for you guys. So our backstory, like in this case, we're just going to say we have a great track record of picking such interest and destinations based on data. Fantastic. And the very last one that we're going to start working on is going to be our local tour guide. Now, for this local tour guide, basically, let's go ahead and type it out for you guys. Local tour guide. For their task and goal, what we're just going to say is we want them to provide the best insights about a specific city selection, because they're going to be the one that's going to go off and find all the cool things for us. And they're actually going to start, you'll see later, they're going to start searching the internet for us. But enough of that. In the later section, we start building up tools and tasks. And then finally, once again, per usual, when it comes to backstory, we're just going to reiterate what we have defined in our goal. So we're just going to say, once again, that we have a ton of experience and a bunch of extensive knowledge about cities. So, and what's cool as a local tour guide is a very generic term. Think of it like a normal Python or just normal functions. This tour guide is reusable. So this same local expert could be used for, you know, just a random city out in California, or it could be used for something out in China. Like it could be used for anything. It's reusable. That's the cool part about the way we have structured this, all of our agents. So, all right. So what we're going to do next, now that we have this set up, we're going to go ahead and actually move on to the next part of this, where we're going to start setting up our tools that our agents are going to use to help them achieve their goal. So let's go ahead and start working on that now. So now it's time for us to start building out our tools that our agents are going to use. So just to help guide where we're going to go next, all we need to really make so that all of our different agents can work are 2 separate tools. The first tool is just going to be a search tool that's going to allow the agents to go off and explore the internet. So that's going to help with, you know, finding how much things cost, what to pack, safety tips, looking up cities on the internet, looking up weather. Basically everything is going to be looked up through the internet. We'll talk how we're going to do that. And the tool we're going to build actually before that is just going to be a simple calculator. And the reason why we want to do that is just because we need to be able to add up how much things cost. And so that's going to be the first tool that we're going to work on. So what we need to do whenever we're going to create tools for our crew, we're just going to make a new folder, and we're just going to call this folder our tools folder. Let's go ahead and create our 2 different files in here. So the first one is going to be our calculator tools, and it's name it like that. And then the other one is going to be our search tools. So we'll just type in search tools.py. Fantastic. So now that we have our 2 tools, what I'm going to do for this part is actually just copy and paste the code, but walk you through why it works line by line, just because I found this very confusing the first time that I saw this. Okay, so here's what's important whenever you look at a tool. So first off, what you'll notice is we're going to go ahead and define our class, and our class is just going to have a calculate function. This calculate function can perform operations using the evaluate operation, where we'll basically pass in, you know, we'll really just pass in a string and we'll convert that. So as you can see in the example, if you passed in something like this, we would go off and this function would perform that operation. So that's what's happening at a high level. But let me talk about what's actually happening under the hood using the tools functionality. So anytime you want to make a function accessible to a crew, what you need to do is go off and add the tool decorator. So anything with an @ sign and the word tool after it basically says, yep, I am usable by the crew. So I thought this was very confusing the first time I saw this, because what you'll notice is we just say, hey, make a calculation, and somehow the crew is automatically going to know what to pass in here. So I found this very confusing. It does work the first time. I guess basically the tool decorator has some intelligence when working with the crew to go off and figure out like what we need to be passing in here. But what I want to show you is actually a more basically robust version, because this is overly simplified. If you are going to go off in the future and you want to basically add in some like higher level, stricter rules on what you want to create with your tools, this is a more in-depth example. I'm going to comment it out, but I'll leave it in this file for you guys. But basically, here's what you need to know whenever you're making a tool that has stricter arguments that you need to pass into it, is you can actually define an argument schema, and that's just going to be done using Pydantic models. So what you'll do is just go off in here and say, well, whenever we calculate using this like smarter or more strict calculator, I need you to pass in two things: the operation, and then we define what the operation is. So, 2 plus 2, and then factor is going to be, well, what is the factor that we're going to be multiplying by the operation? And what's cool is that's actually what they eventually do down here in code. So you can see they're multiplying the operation by a factor. So I just thought this was helpful because I was just like, it seems a little too magical just to say, oh, pass in an operation and crew will know exactly what an operation is and what to pass into it. So just know if you ever need to go a little bit deeper and provide some stricter guidance on what the crew should do with a function, you can do this. So I'm going to comment this out, but I'm going to leave this in the code so that you guys can see it and potentially access it yourself. So, okay, let's go back, uncomment all this, because that is everything we need to do for our calculator. So let's go ahead now and move back over to working on our search tools. So setting up our search tool is going to be a little bit more involved, but once again, I'm just going to, for the time's sake, copy and paste and then walk you through this line by line. So, okay, once again, what you'll notice is we're going to create a class which is going to contain the function that we want to run. Per usual, we are going to add a decorator so that CrewAI knows that it can use this tool and also basically give it some instructions on what it can do. So in this case, obviously it's going to go off and search the internet. Now, how is this going to work? Well, what's going to happen is we are going to be using a service called Serper. Now, if you haven't heard of Serper before, basically what they allow you to do is go off and do Google searches. They're an awesome service. Definitely recommend checking them out. And in fact, what you'll need to do if you want to actually enable search, you need to come over here and sign up. And once you sign up, you'll get 2,500 free queries. So definitely recommend it. It's even worth paying for. They have great deals. Now, the next thing is once you've signed up, what you'll do is you'll be able to go over to the dashboard so you can see exactly how many queries you've been making on each day. And what's pretty cool is like you can actually see kind of a log of what's been, which queries you've performed so far. So as you can see, I've been performing this to look up stuff in Thailand. But the important thing that you need to do is go over to the API key section and you want to generate an API key. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy one just so you can see what's going to happen, because we need to save this API key to our application. So I'm showing you this because I'm going to go reset mine immediately afterwards, but it is very, very, very important that you do not show this API key to other people because they'll be able to use your request and obviously spend your own money. So make sure you keep this secret. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. So you're going to come over here, click copy. Let's come back over to our application, and we'll come back to the tools in a second, but we need to do this first. What we're going to do is go over here and we're going to create a new file. And this is just going to be a .env file. So that's the first thing we're going to do. The next thing we're going to do is come over here and you need to make sure that your .getignore file is specifically calling out .env, because what this will do is it'll make sure that you are not saving your environment variables off to GitHub where people can see them. Fantastic. So now that we have this set up, what we're going to do is go ahead and paste our Serper API key, and let's head back over to our search tool to see what they call it. So from our environment variables, we need to grab the Serper API key. So we're just going to go ahead and call it like this. Fantastic. So we now have our keys set up so that our Serper tool and search tool can go off and actually start making requests to the internet on our behalf. So that's how all that works. But all right, let's keep chugging along so you guys can see what's happening. So the main thing, like I said, we're going to go off and make quick Google searches. And the way we're able to make our request off to Serper is by passing along our API key and our headers. And what we're going to do is we are going to pass along the payload, which is going to be our query. So what we're doing is saying, hey, I would like to make a post request to this endpoint with these headers, which has our API keys, and I want to query for this data. We're going to get back a response, and what we're going to do is just do some generic validation to say like, well, did we get back a good response? Yes or no. The next thing we're going to do is if we did get a valid response, we're going to start pulling out the information that was gathered for us. And what we're going to do is basically start building up a little repository of data that was passed back to us. So we're going to look in the top 4 results. We're going to look at the title of the web page, the link, and then we're also going to grab apparently a short snippet about what that search result said. So that's how we're going to go off and explore the internet. And like I said, I know that was kind of a lot and we went through it quickly, but just know that these are the only 2 tools that you need to get up and start working with our trip planner. So now that we've covered that, what we're going to do next is go off and start working on our task, which in my opinion are the most important part of setting up the whole crew. So let's go ahead and start working on that. So now it's time for us to start working on creating our task for our crew. So all we need to do is go over to our task.py folder, open it up. And once again, I couldn't find a ton of good documentation online to define what made a good task. So once again, I made a cheat sheet for you guys to make your lives easier as you are going off and creating your own AI army after this video. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste it, and then we're gonna walk through this step by step so that we can go ahead and create our own task. Because like I said, I've gone off and done this and my crew just ran in circles and gave out garbage results. So I think this is going to save you guys a bunch of time. So let's go ahead, open it up, and get ready to start answering from the top. So the purpose of our task. So when we're creating tasks, we want to keep the end goal in mind. And what we want to do is be very clear on the specific outcomes we want our task to achieve. And then from there, we're just going to keep breaking down our outcome into actionable tasks. And then once we have these smaller actionable tasks, we're going to start assigning them to each of our agents that we created earlier. And then from there, we're just going to make sure that when we're defining those tasks to those agents, we're going to be super descriptive and provide clear instructions. And like, let's just take a step back from AI for a second. Like if we were thinking about hiring someone to mow your lawn or someone to do a job for you, what you would do is if you wanted to make sure that you got everything that you needed to get done, you would write out exactly step by step, desired outcome. I want you to clean this part, then this part, and this part. That way there's nothing left up to the agent to figure out on their own. They know exactly what they need to go off and do. So like I said, just think like you're hiring an employee and give them crystal clear instructions. Okay, so this will normally be blank for you guys, but I went ahead and copied it in just to save us some time. So in our case, we need to figure out what our overall ideal goal is. So in our case, what we're trying to do is create a detailed itinerary, including city selection, attractions, and practical travel advice. So what is the high level outcome desired goal that we're looking for? In our case, I'm just gonna go ahead and answer this. And like I said, this is the exact basically practice or cheat sheet that I would expect y'all to fill out before you start diving into the code. So in our case, what we're going to do is our key task is to create a detailed 7-day travel itinerary. Okay. Simple enough. Well, how does one go about creating a 7-day trial itinerary? Well, what you'll notice is a lot of these tasks kind of come back to what our agents were doing. So if you ever get stuck figuring out what needs to be done, you can actually go back over to your agents file and figure out, well, what does agent number 1 need to do? What does agent number 2 need to do? Because that's how we're going to be assigning tasks. So that's actually what we're going to work on next. So let's go ahead and just think for our itinerary planner. Well, what this person needs to do is go ahead and actually, develop a detailed travel plan for each day of the trip. The next part is for our city selection person. They need to go off and analyze and pick the best cities for us. So city selection, analyze, and pick the best cities to visit. And then finally, for the local tour guide, they need to basically do that. Just find a local expert and provide insights and recommendations. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we need to assign task to agents. And that's kind of what we've done already up here. But just note, sometimes you're going to work on bigger tasks where you just might have a general worker bee, and that worker bee can go off and do a bunch of tasks. So we're going to go ahead and skip this right now because each one of these is going to be tied to the person, basically who it matches. Okay, cool. So now here comes the part to where a lot of what we have planned is going to start going into action. So what I've done is I've made a template for you guys to go off and basically paste down into here into each one of the tasks. So to make your life easier and to make sure that your tasks are actually going to help move your crew towards a goal. So here's what an ideal template will look like. You'll provide the task and you'll say exactly what the agent needs to work on. Then you'll provide a more detailed description of what the agent's expected to do and actionable steps. If you can provide any examples, this is where you're going to do it. And then finally, what you're going to do is tell the task what parameters it has to work with and a brief description of each of the parameters. So for example, you could think of like explore a city. Well, a city name could be a potential parameter, or the weather, or a specific date. So these are just things that you can pass in here. Basically an unlimited number of parameters. Just define them here to help provide your agent, whenever they're performing the task, they'll have context of what's going on. And then finally, you'll notice in a lot of the code that there's this self_tip selection. And basically we're telling the agent, hey, if you do your best work, I'll give you a $10,000 commission. I've just noticed that this was a lot included in a lot of the examples. And it seems to be a way to basically help align the goal. Basically, the agents are basically aligned with making money. So if we tell it it'll get a big commission, it apparently tries its best to do a great job. So, okay, enough of the high level overview. Let's go ahead and actually start turning in this template into actual tasks. So we're going to go ahead and start working and creating our task now based on our cheat sheet. So the first thing we want to do is scroll down, and what we're going to do is just go ahead and rename the first task. And we're going to be making this task the plan itinerary task, because this is what we want to make sure that our travel agent is working on the whole time. So plan our trip itinerary. Now, here's what we're going to start doing. This is where you and I are going to start defining which parameters we want to pass into our itinerary. So what we want to do is first, we want to pass in the city because we want to know where we're traveling. And for our task, we also need to have some general information of like travel dates, like kind of like when are you thinking about going? And then that's just going to be a string. And then the next part is just going to be the interest. So like basically, what is our main customer interested in doing whenever they are traveling? That way we can help cater it to them. Okay, so what we're going to do next, let's go ahead and get rid of all this. What we're going to do next is go ahead and go up top and start pasting in everything that we had set up from the get-go. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this, scroll down, come in here, and this is where we're going to paste it. Now, we're obviously going to clear a lot of this up and clean it up, but it is important that we're working from the same starting point. That way it makes your life easier when you're going off and doing this yourself. Okay, so what is the main task that we want to do? Well, in our case, what we want to work on is developing a 7-day travel itinerary. All right. So what we want to do next is we want to make a description that could be basically handed over to anyone for them to start working. So we want to be clear, direct, and provide specific instructions. So that's what this looks like right here. So I'm going to read it to you guys just so you can go ahead and, type it up yourselves if you want, or just pull it on the source code and, use it yourself. So the main thing we want to do for our plan itinerary task is we want to expand the city guide into a full 7-day travel itinerary with detailed per day plans, including weather forecasts, places to eat, packing suggestions, and a budget breakdown. You must suggest actual places to visit, actual hotels to stay, and actual restaurants to go to. So this is being very clear. This is what we expect from you. This itinerary should cover all aspects of the trip from arrival to departure, integrating the city guide information with practical travel logistics. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do is say is our task, what we want from our main planning, our itinerary. And the next thing is we want to go ahead and say, what are our parameters that we can work with? So we're going to go ahead and get rid of these, and we're going to paste in the new ones. And these tie exactly to what we have up here, to where we're going to have our city. These are our trip dates and our travel interests. So I hope this is going to make it easier for you guys as you're working on this on your own. And the last thing, what we can do is go ahead and provide a note. So we're just going to say like delivering your best work will be greatly appreciated. But what we're going to start doing actually is getting rid of this. And we're just going to go ahead and always just use the self-tip section for this. Okay, cool. So that's what we're going to do for the first task. Now let's go ahead and start working on the next task. And for this one, what we're going to do is start working on identifying which city we want to work with. So we're just going to call this our identify city task. Now this one is going to be pretty straightforward. What we want to do is we want to have our agent go ahead and figure out where we're at. We want them to know where we're going, what cities we're interested in looking at. what interest the traveler has, and once again, their travel dates. So this is what we need to know in order to go off and identify cool cities to travel to. So once again, let's go ahead and delete this. And what we're going to do, once again, come up here, paste our template, go ahead and come down here and start working with it. Fantastic. So I know we're jumping around, but this is going to make it nice and easy for us. Great. Okay, so what do we want to start doing for our identify city? Well, the main overarching task that we want to do is, going back to earlier, is we want to identify the best cities. Then when it comes to our description, we just want to analyze which cities are the best to go ahead and travel to. So we're just going to say analyze which cities are the best to travel to based on our criteria from our weather research earlier, travel costs, and from there what we want to do is compare it to other cities and make sure that we're picking the ones that best fit with what we're trying to do. And once again, we have to be very clear on our output. So we tell it your final answer must be a detailed report on a chosen city, including flight costs, weathercast, and attractions. So once again, you need to say what your outputs are. And then for here, what we're going to do, once again, is paste in our parameters just so we are able to access them in our code. And this is going to be our travel dates. And then finally for our notes, once again, we're just going to do this tip selection right here. Fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the third and final task. So we're just going to copy and paste this one, come down here. Now this task, if you remember, this is just going to be for our local tour guide expert. He's the one that's going to be executing this. So what we're going to do for this one is, well, this agent is going to have a few different parameters to work with. He is going to know exactly which city we're at. He also needs to know where we're traveling, like what dates, because, you know, different things are happening different times of the year. And the last one is interest. That way he can go, oh, you like to do yoga or hiking? You must try out these different locations. So what we're going to do down here is briefly update our task to make it specific for this person. So for this agent. So we're just going to say, hey, you need to gather an in-depth city guide information. And the next thing is we completely need to change up the description to fit this new agent. And in this case, what we want to do is just go off and compile an in-depth guide for the city selection. So like, hey, we went to Thailand. Here's all the cool things to do in Bangkok, Thailand. And, you know, like I said, just go ahead and dive deep into that specific city. And then from there, what we're going to do is just basically update our parameters down here, make sure they match. Things look good. We're going to include our note per usual, and fantastic. So we have so far went ahead and checked off all of our tasks. And what I would like to do next is go ahead and tying everything together inside of our main.py file, where we're going to put together our tools, our task, and go ahead and put together our agents. So let's go ahead and start working on cleaning this up next. So right now we're about to tie everything together so that we can start running our crew. And what I'm going to do is we're going to actually start working with our main function down here, or what calls our main function. And then we're going to work our way from the top down and start cleaning everything up. But what we need to do is, in the very beginning, is we need to go off and actually define which parameters we're going to pass into our application, because this is going to be a command line interface where we're going to actually, you know, prompt the user to let us know like where they'll be traveling from, where the cities where they're going to go, what the date ranges that they want to travel, or what month or whatever, and then also their interest. So these are all the different variables that we're going to pass in, like you saw earlier, in our task. This is where all this is coming from. Okay, fantastic. So this is what is going to happen. And this is where, as you can see, we're going to pass everything into here. Okay, so what we need to do next is, like I said, we're just going to work from the top down. So we're going to clean up some of our imports at the top, and we're going to make sure everything's installed in just a little bit. But for right now, let's go ahead and keep it looking like this. Okay, and like I said, this is just because we're working with the boilerplate code that came from the starter pack. All right, yeah, let's just keep getting rid of everything. Just a lot of deleting right now. Okay, so what we're going to work on is go off, and what we're going to do is start defining our custom crew. And in our case, this is going to be our trip crew, actually. And what we're going to do is go ahead and create our constructor file. So in our case, what we want to do is accept those variables we create at the very bottom of the screen down here, our location, cities, date ranges, and so forth. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and say origin, then we're going to say cities, date range, and interest. Just to make sure we did do origin. Yeah, so this will be, we'll just go ahead and call this our origin, just to make sure we're saying the same names. Okay, cool. And then what we're going to do is just go ahead and assign those. So we're going to go ahead and say this is our origin. Then we're going to go ahead and do the next one and say our cities. And then we're going to just keep going down the list for our date ranges, and then same for our interests. Okay, fantastic. So once we have all of our information saved locally, what we want to do next is go off and actually start creating and updating our run. So this is what we're going to do here. What we're doing right now, you can see we're importing our custom agents. Let's be a little bit more clever with this. And these are going to be our travel agents, just to better update and provide better naming practices. So let's go ahead. I'm just cleaning up as we're typing. So what we're going to do, update this real fast to be our travel agents. Update that and travel agents. Fantastic. And then same for our tasks. So over here, what you'll notice at the top of the file, this is going to be our custom task, and these really need to be our travel task. Great. So we're cleaning up as we go. So this is going to be our travel task. Fantastic. All right, so now that we have defined our task, what we need to do next is actually start defining our agents. So in our case, remember, we had 3 different agents. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our agents file so you can see exactly what we have over here on the right, and you can see why we're pasting it in. So the first one coming from our agent is going to be our expert travel agent. So that's the first one, and we're just going to paste it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so you guys can see everything at the same time. The next agent we're going to work on is going to be our city selection agent. Paste that. And then finally, what we have is our local tour guide. So let's paste this too. Grab both these, update it. All right, fantastic. So now that we've defined all of our agents, what we want to work on next is identifying our task. And what we're going to do in here is let's go ahead and scroll down just a little bit. We're going to work on these. So the first task that we need to work on, let's go ahead and scroll down, just so you can see exactly why I'm copying and pasting stuff. So the first one is going to be the plan itinerary. So paste it and paste it. And then what we're going to do is define, the first thing we're going to define is the agent that we want to work on this. So in our case, when it comes to working on planning our itinerary, we want to make sure that our expert travel agent is the one doing this. And then we're going to pass in everything else it's asking for, the city, travel dates, and interest. So the next one is cities. Then it's going to be self.dates, and then last one is self.interest. Fantastic. Paste those in, format it so it's nice and clean for us. Great. So now we've defined the first task. Let's keep going. So the next task we're going to work on is going to be gathering city info. I'm just going to paste it and then pass in the proper variables. So once again, who do we want to be working on this? Well, in our case, that's going to be our city selection expert. So right here. And then what we want to do next is define the cities. And then we're going to work on the travel dates. And then finally, we're going to work on the interest. And all this information is just coming from right over here when we initially decided what information we want to pass to the task. And then third, what we're going to do is work on our final task, which is going to be, I think I might have passed in the wrong thing. Yeah, gather city info. That was my bad. I made a quick mistake. This should have been identify cities. Yeah, fantastic. Now we're going to copy and paste this and work on the final task, which was gather city information. Okay. So that's what we're going to work on for this one. And if you look at what variables we need to pass in here, well, the first one is who needs to do this? Well, this is going to be our local tour guide, and our local tour guide needs to know the city, travel dates, and interest. So cities, travel dates, and then finally our interest. Great. Let's go ahead and move everything down so it's looking clean. Awesome. So now that we've defined all of our agents and all of our tasks, we need to go ahead and define our crew. So that's what's going to be happening down here. And we're not quite out of the woods yet too. There's a few other things we have to clean up outside of this, but let's go ahead and paste in our agents. So expert travel agent, city selection, and then we're going to have our local tour guide. So it auto-completed it for us. That's awesome. Let's zoom back in. And then I'm a big fan of like spacing them out like this way just so that it's easy to see. And then for our task, this is going to be pretty straightforward here too. We just identify our plan itinerary, and we're also going to do our gather city information. Fantastic. So now that we defined our crews and our agents, what we need to do is actually come back over to our agents real fast, because if you remember, we have a few things that were left uncommented. So the first one is, what do we want our agents to do? Well, let's work on these real fast. When it comes to setting up our expert travel agent, they need to have access to 2 specific tools. In our case, they want to go off and look at the internet. And then the other one is they need to be able to do all the budgeting and calculating. So first, we need to make sure that we have access to our search tools and more specifically, our search internet function. And we'll go ahead and do this in just a second. Internet. So you might be wondering, why is it not working? Well, that's because we haven't imported it yet. So what we need to do up top is just say, from our tools folder, I want to use our search tools file, and I want to import search tools. So that's going to get it working for that one. But let's go ahead and import our calculator too, because that was the next one. So what we're going to do for this one is our calculator tools, and we want to import our calculator tools class, so we can come back down here and use it. So we're just going to pass in next. We just want to go ahead and say calculate. Fantastic. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and actually update this for our city selection expert too. And all they need access to is actually looking up on the internet. So we're just going to give her the search tools and search internet. And then finally, what we're going to do for our local tour guide, once again, update our tools. And we're just going to say, hey, you're allowed to go search the internet. So this is how we're able to give our agents the ability to go off and do things. And once again, allow delegation. Let's clean that up. All right, great. So this is looking fantastic. We have all of our agents updated. Life's looking good. We're also going to clean up some of our imports at the top of the file. What you'll notice is we're actually going to go off and import some of these in just a little bit. But the other thing that we are missing, just to tie it all together, is we need to go off and actually import our OpenAI keys. So if you remember earlier when we were defining which LLMs we're going to use, we said we're going to use chat OpenAI. So in order to do that, what we need to do is go ahead and give it our OpenAI keys. And if you come back over here, what you'll notice is we don't have our OpenAI keys yet. So what we need to do is go ahead and hop back over to OpenAI real quick. And once we're over here, what we're going to do is go over to API keys. And as you can see, these are all my API keys. What you're going to do is you want to create a new secret key. Once again, you're going to want to make sure that this gets kept secret, but I'm just going to call this trip planner YouTube. We're going to go ahead and save it. It's going to show you the keys, copy it, put it back over in our environment variable file. And we need to name this a very specific way. So in our case, what we're going to name it is just going to be, let's go ahead and come back over here. We're going to say OpenAI API key. And the reason why we have to do this is because OpenAI by default is going to look for this key value name. So that's all we need to do. And now that we have that tied up, what we can do is actually go ahead and actually start working on running our agents. So let's go ahead and start doing that. And we'll probably need to clean up just a few dependencies. And one of them is actually going to be first actually loading in our new environment variables. So let's go ahead and start working on that real fast. And real fast, before we start working with dependencies, I just want to call out that this isn't 100% accurate, because right now you'll see it's like, oh, you haven't installed CrewAI. But if you go back to our Pi project, you'll notice we have. So the reason why we're having this error is because when we're using Visual Studio Code, it's pointing to the wrong spot. So here's how we can fix that. Well, what we're going to do is we need to add our interpreter path, which I've done just a second ago, but let me show you how I added this trip planner to our environment. So what I'm going to do is just go down here to our terminal, and all you have to do is just type in poetry shell. And once you do that, it will actually show you where this virtual environment is activated at. So in our case, it's activated in my library, cache, poetry, virtual environment, and it's mentioned right here. So all you have to do, copy and paste this up here when it says your interpreter path. You're going to come in here, paste it, hit enter. And whenever you get done, you can come back over here and actually click it. And what you'll notice is CrewAI is currently squiggly because we don't have it installed in our current environment. But when I switch over to the proper one, you'll see that it's like, yep, you have it. All right, fantastic. So now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and resolve a few of these missing dependencies that we need to get sorted out. So the first one is we just added our OpenAI keys, so we need to start working with them. So we're going to start importing .env, import load.env. We're just going to load all of our environment variables. So that's the first one that we want to work on. And then what we're going to do next is if you actually hop over to our agents file, you'll notice that we're missing our LangChain OpenAI. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to come down here, and we just didn't add this in the beginning. That was my mistake. And we're just going to type in poetry add, type it in right here. It's going to go off and update our TOML file for us. Fantastic. So that looks good. And these will get resolved in just a few seconds. We'll come back to them. But outside of that, let's go to our task file. Everything looks good here. Same looks good in our main file. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and we're going to start trying to run this, and we're just going to debug live together. So whenever I try and run, make sure you have your shell open, but let's just go ahead and type in Python, and we're going to type in main because this is our main.py file. And it's going to go off and start running. And we might get a few errors. Yep, like it says, our search file isn't found. So let's go ahead and work on that real fast. So I went ahead and fixed the tools error, but I just want to show you guys why we were having it in the first place. So you'll recognize right now it's saying tools.search tools cannot be resolved, which is on because we have our tools folder right here with our search tools file. So like this is spelled correctly, but the reason we were getting this error is if you go back to our Pi project, you'll notice that there was a tools dependency that we installed. So we need to actually go ahead and undo this. So what we can do is using our terminal, we can just type in poetry, remove tools, and this will go ahead and uninstall it. Life's good. So it removed two things. It also removed it from here. So that works great now. And if we head back over here, you can see we actually no longer get the squigglies. So we're making progress. So let's just go ahead and continue, keep debugging. This is good practice. So now if we, once again, now that we're in our proper environment, if we just run Python and we type in run or Python main, let's go ahead and try running our code real fast. So as you can see, things are looking good. So what we can do is just go ahead and say we're just going to be traveling from Atlanta, Georgia. What cities? Let's just go ahead and say we're going to go to Thailand. What date range? Let's just go ahead and say November. And then from there, what are some high level interests? So we're just going to go off and say that we like to do hiking. My wife's interested in yoga and sightseeing. So let's go ahead and run it. And we are running into a few more errors, so let's go ahead and quickly knock these out. So as you can see for this bug, it's saying that we accidentally messed up and didn't put all the proper parameters inside of our identify city task. So let's go ahead and go back over to our main py file. And you can see on line, it says AD 35 actually. Yep, line 35. It's saying that this doesn't have all the proper parameters. Let's go ahead and split them up, look side by side so we can actually see what's going on. So we're missing, so we have our agent, we have, oh, we don't have origin. That's literally all it was. So self.origin. Okay, good check. And let's just check real fast. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for our identify cities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for city info. What we're going to do is just go ahead and have 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. And then for our first one for plan itinerary, what we want to have is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, life looks good. Let's close it out, zoom back in, and our main py file, try running it again. What we're going to do this time is where we're traveling from, Atlanta, Georgia. Once again, we'll say Thailand, and then what date range is November, and then we're just going to say site, seeing, yoga, food. All right, let's run it off. So what it's going to do now is go off and actually start running the crew and go off and actually plan our trip for us. So now this takes a few minutes to do, but we already covered this in the examples, so I'm not going to wait too long. But as you can see, it is continually working. We're searching the internet. The light's looking good. So I'm going to let it run, and then I'm going to show you the result here in just a few seconds. But let's go ahead and wait. All right, guys, so it's been about 4 minutes or so, and we finally had the crew put together our full 7-day travel itinerary. And you've already kind of seen this before, but you know, hey, you made this one, so it's working. But as you can see, it has us take off from where our origination source is, and then it has us go over to our destination. And as you can see, our city selection expert has us going to different areas inside of Thailand, and then eventually takes us back home when we go back to Atlanta. And then finally from there, what we're going to do is at each stop, it tells us what we need to be doing, and that's because of the local tourist expert. And outside that, we're just going to note what the weather forecast is, what we should pack, and how much it's going to cost going back and forth to Thailand to Atlanta. So all around, this is super cool. So I hope you guys have loved what we've been able to put together so far. But that's a wrap for this video, guys. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I hope you're ready to go off and make your own army of AI agents. And I want to mention, if you did like this content, you're definitely going to like some of the other videos I have on this channel. We have Fullstack AI tutorials. I teach you how to make SaaS businesses, pretty much everything. If you can think of it, I have it on this channel. So you'll definitely want to check out whatever videos get recommended right after this. And I can't wait to see you in the next video. See ya.